The Raptors made a trade. OG Anunoby, Precious Achiuwa, Malachi Flynn to the New York Knicks, and coming back, Immanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, hometown kid, and a second round pick via the Detroit Pistons, which is basically a 31st, 32nd pick, which is a first rounder almost. So I got a lot of thoughts about this trade. Honestly, it's a very interesting deal. So let's start about going out. Obviously, Malachi Flynn, Precious Achiuwa, they're in the rotation. We saw what we could from them. Malachi Flynn, barely a backup guard in the league. He's gone. Precious Achiuwa, struggled learning how to play backup five in terms of a defensive role. He still lacks kind of the attention. The Raptors weren't able to come to an extension deal with him this past summer. And clearly he wanted more money. Said he was a top 5 defender in the league. He feels like he is. And we did not really see that in these first 30 games that we've seen from him playing. So he needs more money. Him moving on, not necessarily the worst thing for the Raptors. And then finally the big piece, OG Anunoby. OG Anunoby been a core contributor on this team. Been here for 7 years. We've seen him grow, develop into an amazing player. One of the best defenders in the league, bar none. All defense guy every single year. An elite catch and shoot 3-point shooter, not a pull-up shooter by any means. And the best corner 3-point shooter in the NBA right now. Like, it's just him. So that's a big thing to lose. The Raptors have obviously been built around their 3-star forwards. That's kind of what they've been selling and pushing for a while. Scotty Barnes, OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam. How are they going to fit? OG Anunoby, great player. Since the trade, obviously, we've seen Jake Fisher report that Anunoby's agents had to let other teams know that he was looking for about $40 million a year this coming season in free agency, along with a bigger role. So far this season, even with Fred VanVleet gone, we haven't seen any type of role growing for OG Anunoby. He's more or less been relegated to a 3-and-D role where he's shooting maybe 5-6 threes a game, but he's not really getting up to volume. And part of that is limited because he's not a motion shooter. He's not a movement 3-point shooter. He's a more or less standstill 3-point shooter. When he does catch the ball, it's a little difficult for him to go horizontal left and right. He's kind of just like, okay, attack or close out directly type of guy. Amazing defender though. I will say losing him is a big loss for the Raptors in terms of talent, but it had become clear that I don't think that they could maximize his talents alongside the Raptors' other stars in Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam. And we don't know what Pascal Siakam's future is, but let's just say around Scotty Barnes is on the ball. He operates at the top of the key, operates out of the post here and there. And he himself made himself into a pull-up shooter and above the break 3-point shooter, which OG Anunoby hasn't really been able to do now 7 years in. And if he's looking for 40 million, another part of Jake Fisher's report was that not only was he looking for 40 million, but he was willing to take a little bit less than 40 million to join the Knicks. So clearly he was a guy who's looking out, wanted a bigger role, and the Raptors, quite frankly, are not suited to give him that role. I think as amazing as OG Anunoby is as a player, he is a premium guy to have as your third guy on a championship team. And as an offensive player, he makes sense if your other core stars are guards, are on-ball guards. But if you have on-ball forwards as your other players that are, part of your core, OG Anunoby makes a little bit less sense, I think, there. In terms of the defense that you lose out, all defense, OG Anunoby, I think it was clear the Raptors weren't really benefiting from it as much as, that role entails. On a championship team, obviously he's a stopper. In a clutch situation, you want OG Anunoby guarding the ball. No one else had want. But the fact of the matter is the Raptors aren't a good enough team to ever be in those scenarios. Even when they are in those scenarios, their team defense, they just didn't have enough good players to play enough good team defense where OG Anunoby's one-on-one defense mattered. So moving off of him, great talent, but when you shift him and you're only really using maybe 70-80% of his talents at most anyways, it made a lot less sense to keep him around, and therefore I think the rationale for the trade makes sense. Now, the key pieces of the trade coming back, RJ Barrett, you've got Immanuel Quickley, obviously, is the, shining star of this trade, and then you got a second round pick. So that's kind of how I break it down. I see the Raptors of having made this trade for trading the talents of OG Anunoby, who they were getting maybe 75% optimization out of his talents, for Immanuel Quickley, who is also very talented, a little bit younger, and talented in a different way than the Raptors are currently built. He gives them an on-ball presence that they just do not have. He's the most dynamic guard they've had since Kyle Lowry, bar none. It's not even close. So you're shifting that talent over to a talent that may not be as good or polished as of yet. I think offensively he's clearly better, but fits in a little bit more seamlessly in terms of, you can optimize Immanuel Quickley's talents better around Pascal and Scotty than you can OG Anunoby. You can have Immanuel Quickley on the ball and still have Scotty and Pascal be dangerous off ball of him. And that is really important. There are actual two-man games that you can play with a guard and a forward that you can't play with a forward and forward, especially with OG Anunoby not having the best ball handle. So I like that shift. And then the other piece, the way I see this trade, is they've effectively turned Flynn and Achiuwa, two pieces that they tried to make rotation pieces that don't really seem to work in their system, into RJ Barrett, who's 23 years old right now. Scotty Barnes 22 years old, so he lines up. He's a hometown guy, so he's not going to be someone who has a problem playing here long term. You're going to be able to probably keep him. He's also on a long-term deal already at a salary number that maybe it's a little high, but as the cap increases should be that of a normal starter, and he's been a good starter on a good team. Obviously there are fit issues with him and Randall, but I think one of the big issues in New York, he was kind of billed as the number 2 guy, and then once Brunson came as the number 3 guy, and his usage rates have been at like 24, 25, 26% the last 3 seasons. That's very high for the quality of player he is. Meanwhile, the Raptors, who had OG Anunoby as the third forward on their team, OG's been at 17 to 20% his entire career in usage. So I think effectively you're trading OG Anunoby, who was one competent player on your team, very talented, but that you weren't fully optimizing, for 2 talented players that you probably can optimize a lot better. So it gives you more players on your team that you can actually trust and play. Now, kind of getting into those players, let's go to the star part of the trade, is Immanuel Quickley. We're getting Immanuel Quickley back. Quickley, amazing talent. Like, I am so excited. I haven't been this excited for the Raptors in a very long time. And I was trying to think back, like, what other trades have the Raptors made that have made me like giddy. Obviously the Kawhi Leonard trade is obvious, but I remember the last time I felt as hopeless about the Raptors was before we traded for Kyle Lowry, and then getting Kyle Lowry. And I remember being so excited for his first few games, being like, you know what, this is a guard that, like, he can do something. Like, there's something there that you might be able to unlock. And having that in Quickley as a guy who, with a bigger role can do a lot better. Right now, he's been playing off the bench this entire season because obviously they want to start Josh Hart beside Brunson. Playing Brunson and Quickley is a little bit difficult. But last season when Quickley started, he started 21 games, played 39 minutes a night. Shout out Tom Thibodeau. Real one. 23 points a night, 5.5 rebounds, 5.5 assists on 1.3 turnovers. 47, 40, and 85 shooting splits, shooting 8 threes a game. That's phenomenal. And we only saw that for 21 games, but like being able to see that in a young guard, and especially a young guard who has now this season taken a leap as a pull-up shooter. Last season, he was already a good pull-up shooter at 35% on 2.5 attempts a game. This season, he's up to 40.6% on pull-ups on 2.3 attempts in limited minutes. So now expanding his minutes up to 30 minutes as a starter, it just gives the Raptors a completely new threat. Watching the footage on him, he is starting his attack about like 3-4 feet behind the line. The defender, in a pick and roll, the defender has to meet him outside the 3-point line, and he is so good with the ball and so quick with the ball and so dynamic with the ball. He has so many dribble moves, and he's able to get to whatever spot he kind of wants. It gives the Raptors a pick and roll ball handling threat that they just flat out don't have this season. Right now, Dennis Schroeder runs a pick and roll. Both defenders are going under, and the opposing team's defense is getting set up around the free throw line. So there's not really much gap for Jakob Poeltl to roll into or make decisions and be more useful. Suddenly, just with Immanuel Quickley, you've made Jakob Poeltl revert to being an incredibly useful piece on your team, to being someone who's more of a hindrance on your offense. It gives your offense an engine to run out of that we saw with Fred VanVleet last season. And Quickley is shooting better than Fred did last season. He's a more dynamic on-ball guy than Fred. Maybe he doesn't have the same passes as Fred does. Fred's obviously, a 29, 30-year-old player. Quickley, 4th season, he's going to be an RFA. That's also great. But 4th season, 24 years old, he's got a long way ahead of him. And I think there's a lot of growth potential for him, just seeing the type of passes he's been able to make in the footage. Like, this is not a guy just making simple passes. Like, yeah, his assist percentage has been low the last couple of seasons, but the Knicks have been deploying him as a shooting guard. That being said, like, again, as a starter, 5.5 assists on 1.3 turnovers, pretty good. On top of that, he's making difficult passes. Like, I'm seeing him get trapped on the wing 3 and then making a cross-court pass to the opposite corner on the money multiple times. I'm seeing him hit the roller from an odd angle with a bounce pass He's able to hit, he's able to drive to the rim, absorb the defense, and then hit a drop-off pass at full speed. That's very intriguing, and I think the Raptors should be incredibly intrigued. On top of that, Quickley, actual on-ball scorer. And I mean like 3 to 6 dribbles. This is per NBA tracking. 3 to 6 dribbles. This season, he is shooting 51% from the floor, 57% effective field goal percentage. That means like he's using dribbles and he's still able to make a bucket after it. Most players, the more dribbles they take, the less they score. He's not just a catch and shoot guy. And then on 7+ dribbles, he's still at 46% EFG because, again, he can hit the 3, so he can bail you out late shot clock. Just a dynamic guard the Raptors have not had in a long time and should breathe a lot of life in this offense. And specifically, unlike OG Anunoby, is a player that can actually play two-man in a very easy way. It's not difficult to play a two-man game with a Pascal Siakam or a Scotty Barnes or a Jakob Poeltl. The floor is more malleable with Quickley on the floor because he gives you a different type of threat on offense rather than the Raptors constantly having to get all these switches, find the mismatch, and attack that way, which is one way to score, but cannot be your only threat on offense. Now the Raptors have a true pick and roll combo they can go to and a guard that they can go to as an on-ball scorer on top of, finding their mismatches, finding Pascal on the post. It is an incredibly intriguing trade, and I think Raptor fans should be incredibly excited for Immanuel Quickley because I don't think we've had someone with this much hope outside of Scotty Barnes in a long time. And I think it's a great steal of a trade that the Raptors have made here. Also, the reporting on Quickley, what his deal is, he wasn't able to come to an extension with the Knicks. The Knicks were hoping to get him for 18 mil on extension. He was looking more for 25 mil. So you're comparing, hey, you're trying to give, usage to a third guy or a second guy. Do you want to give that to OG Anunoby at 40 million? Because that's what his asking rate's going to be on top of having that big role. Or do you want to give it to Quickley at like 25 million? I think that answer's pretty obvious. And that situation the Raptors are in, great top line swap that they've done there. The next piece of it, RJ Barrett. Now we know the Precious Achiuwa and the Malachi Flynn of it all. It is what it is. RJ Barrett, as a Knick, he's had to have these massive usage roles. Now he's in a fourth option role with the Raptors. I think he can be good. He is a very good cutter. He's a very good driver with the ball. Those are both roles that the Raptors, necessarily didn't have in OG Anunoby. OG Anunoby, an elite shooter from the corners. RJ Barrett, he's about, I think, 35% catch and shoot, 38% from the corner, which is fine for this season, but he's been on and off. He'll hover between 30 to 38% from the corner. It is what it is. But one of the issues I think I always had with OG Anunoby being a 40% shooter and being your main shooter in your lineup is a lot of his shots are coming as catch and shoot, and a lot of them are coming in the corner, which is not the corner is a short place to have your spacing from, because a defender can help in the paint and then get out to the corner. The corner's not that far away. Now when you're spacing out to above the break, and this is why Gary Trent lineups tend to have better spacing for the Raptors, above the break shooters are much more dangerous. So the Raptors are able to switch him for Quickley, who is an above the break maestro. I forgot to mention this part, but above the break, the guy's shooting 43.5% from 3. So it changes where you're moving your elite 3-point shooting. You're moving it from the corners to above the break. And then what that does is it allows you, the Raptors are filled with a bunch of guys who are, kind of 3-point shooters. Like they can hover in that 33-35% range, or they're just catch and shoot 3-point shooters. You want those guys shooting catch and shoot corners. You don't want them shooting catch and shoot above the break. So now by having Quickley as your above the break option, you can place an RJ Barrett in the corner, where if he's only taking corner threes, he's not that bad of an option. Also, RJ Barrett, closeout comes, he can do something off a drive. He can play off ball cutting. And we've seen him in a Team Canada role when he's more team centric. He can be quite a deadly player when used correctly. Both Quickley and RJ have been part of really good Knicks defenses. So they should simply, by adding them and taking OG Anunoby out, sure, your top end defense in terms of stopping one guy, you definitely don't have that stopper anymore. Now you're kind of hoping for your team defense, but now you have better team defenders. You have one additional good team defender that you can rely on. So if one guy's not playing as well in your starting lineup, you actually have somebody you can go to get a 5-man lineup out there that you can trust on defense. Another thing that I wanted to kind of talk about on the defensive end of this whole thing, Immanuel Quickley, his teams have been better with him on defense each of his first 4 years in the league. Like the on-offs on defense and offense quickly improves any lineup he's in. So just the upside that you have there makes the deal for me personally. I think with RJ, you have him on some length, you have him on some term. Maybe you can make something out of him in a lesser role. I think if he just turns out to be a Harrison Barnes type, I think that's a plus. You take that as a solid starter, solid bench guy potentially. And he's still 23 years old. So if he can become a more efficient version of a solid role player, that's fantastic. I think the Raptors take that every day. They already have Scotty Barnes. They still have Pascal Siakam for a little while at least. And now they have Immanuel Quickley, who are going to be eating up the majority of their usage. So they can use RJ in, you know, maybe he can run some bench lineups for you. Now you have someone, an additional ball handler beside your other guard in a Dennis Schroeder or someone, where OG Anunoby couldn't really ever carry your bench lineups because you can't trust him with the ball. He's going to get stripped. He can't really take on pressure in the way that maybe an RJ Barrett can. So I'm personally very excited about it. Obviously the pick's great too. You get a second rounder that's basically a first rounder. That means he contract wise is cheaper, gives you a little bit of room under the cap, get some more cheap talent. The Raptors were able to get Koloko with the 33rd pick this season before this, and Koloko was great. He's great talent. Unfortunately hasn't been able to play this season, but if they can get similar type of rotation level player out of that pick for cheap, that's great to fit around Scotty Barnes. I think moving forward for the Raptors, people are going to say, hey, are they going to be looking for a Pascal Siakam trade? I know Mike Scotto had a piece which says that the Raptors are, when looking for a trade for Pascal Siakam, they've been targeting like big wing forwards. Jalen Johnson's been a name that they've been mentioned to be after in Atlanta. Otherwise, Keegan Murray. It's been a lot of like top tier names that they want in return for Siakam. I don't think they get that from him on an expiring. And I personally think the way Masai Ujiri is, he's very patient. He likes to evaluate. And I think what we have at least seen in these first 30 games is that Pascal Siakam can A, buy into a system, B, that he is still a exceptional basketball player, and that C, that he can play with Scotty Barnes. Him and Scotty work. There's not a lot of friction there. Scotty Barnes shooting the way he is now, him and Pascal can basically take turns running the offense, make the quick pass. The passes that Dennis Schroeder is not able to find when searching for a mismatch that Scotty Barnes might have in the post, Pascal Siakam finds that instantly. Similarly, the other way, Scotty Barnes great at throwing those outlet passes to a leaking out Pascal Siakam early in transition. This team needs to run faster. They want to play faster. They want to make faster decisions. Pascal Siakam has shown the ability to do all of that. So I think adding Immanuel Quickley, adding RJ Barrett, giving them a little bit more talent, giving them a different look on offense realistically than what they've had these past two seasons, when Fred VanVleet hasn't really been able to shoot as well and it's been a little bit more of a struggle, and then especially this season when they just haven't had any guard play. I think is going to really transform this team. And I know the record right now, they're 12-20 after this Detroit loss or something like that, or 12-19. You've got whatever 50 games left in the season. I say you just scrap that and look at zero. Like you have till the deadline to evaluate what this team can look like. If this team is looking good, my personal expectation is that, similar to what Masai Ujiri did with Nene back in Denver, is you sign Pascal Siakam to a reasonable extension. You get him on 3 years, maybe max, maybe a little bit below max if he does want to stay. And then you make him a real trade piece in the summer. There are going to be teams that are going to want to add talent this summer because they're going to flame out in the playoffs. And Pascal Siakam is going to be available at that point. And then you can kind of make your decisions. But that gives you 50 games, or if just till a deadline, maybe it's another 20 games or 15 games to look, how does this new core of Immanuel Quickley, Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes work with some additional bench help, additional help in RJ Barrett? What does that look like? What does it look like when you aren't playing significant negative minutes in Malachi Flynn and Precious Achiuwa every single night to start your fourth quarter? What does that look like moving forward for this team? And I personally am optimistic about how that looks, just because I know Pascal Siakam is a quality player. I think he's shown that. And the more shooting you surround him with, the more dynamic a guard you surround him with. We saw how deadly just Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet inverted screen, like pick and pop, was for years. It was a go-to play. Now you can do that with Scotty Barnes. You can do that with Pascal Siakam because you have a guard who can do that. You can have Immanuel Quickley run quickly, set a go screen, pop for a three, and then if he doesn't get that three, he can actually attack, unlike a Gary Trent, who, if he catches that, doesn't get his three off, just has to hit Pascal or Scotty back. it gives them the type of player that they've been missing that you knew worked. We saw last season this same roster with Jakob work when they had a guard who could hit threes above the break. They've now gotten a better guard who can hit threes above the break, and Immanuel Quickley has a lot of upside. I'm excited for the deal. We'll see how the Raptors go about it. I expect Pascal Siakam, if they play well up until the deadline, to get an extension, probably in the 3-year term, close to max or at max. And then the Raptors will decide in the summer whether to trade him for more pieces or whether this is working or not, because Scottie Barnes is ready to play. I think by next season, this season he's already playing like an all-star. Next season he's probably ready to be crowned an all-star. He's taken the leap. If Immanuel Quickley comes in and also takes a leap and plays as good as he has when he has played as a starter and gives the Raptors that pump, that is not a bad core 3 to work around. The Raptors still have a little bit of wiggle room to play with when it comes to the tax situation. And if they give Pascal his extension, they can still, make a deal in the summer that can get them out of the tax if the team isn't doing that well. I'm not terribly worried about that part. The cap stuff they can kind of figure out. And obviously, RJ Barrett is not, if he fits, he fits. If he doesn't, he's another piece you can kind of move for more pieces. So I'm not totally sold on that being the guy if Pascal Siakam's to be moved out. But love the trade. Gives me a little bit of hope in terms of what to watch for the Raptors. Thank you for watching this. Subscribe on this YouTube channel. Subscribe to Pros and Claws. We're going to have a lot of great content for you guys in New Year's. We're really focusing on it. That's our Substack, prosandclaws.substack.com. Shoot us a like, shoot us a subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.